Board Clerk, please do the roll call.
Directors Osborne, Anzini, Dwyer, and Day present. Director Veerkamp absent. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, Clerk to the Board Sullivan present.
All right, we will rise to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll start us off. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Here's our moment to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Okay. Okay, it's been motioned and seconded to adopt the agenda. Before we move on the vote, this is an opportunity to speak against the agenda.
I just
Anybody
wanted
from
to
the public?
confirm that it was moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Day.
Vice versa.
Vice versa.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Osborne.
Okay, time to vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, we'll move on to communications. General Manager?
Good morning. I have one employee I'd like to recognize, but the recognition is not in your board packet because if we had it in there, the employee wouldn't show up. So I'd like to ask Dan Corcoran to come up and discuss the recognition.
All right, President Zini, members of the board, good morning. On October 5th, 1998, the district hired its most recent water treatment plant operator. For the next quarter century, that operator obviously helped navigate quite a few challenges for the district. Fire, flood, you name it. So it's with bittersweet emotion that I announce that today will be Radenko Zakovic's last board meeting.
Oh.
So it's quite going to be a huge loss. And as Jim said, he's such a modest gentleman that he would find a way not to be here if we let him know ahead of time. So we do have an award that we'd like to have Jim present to Radenko. And it's the Board President Lifetime Service Award from October 4th, 1998 to his official last date of October 3rd, 2022. So Radenko, if you wouldn't mind coming up.
Do you want to go to the public over there?
Speech. So while Radenko's coming up to say a few words, and as you know, he's a man of great action, but few words, I'd just like to recognize for everybody how much Radenko's been a mentor to me since I've been at the district. I remember even before I really knew him, he was always there with a solid handshake in the hallway, and that was 18 years ago. So Radenko, congratulations.
Oh. Thank you for recognition. I didn't expect this, but it's okay. I was in this position for 4 years, and pretty much my philosophy as a drinking water operations manager was to bring more as I can information to you here to address issue, to present issues, and ask for your support. There was a couple of projects that I'm glad they are going on, and that was just the beginning of the story. I expect my successor to continue present operational challenges and what we need and ask for support. I'm glad that I spent almost 25 years here.
We're glad you did too.
Thank you. But it's time to go. Thank you.
That's what they call retirement. Thank you very much.
Rodenko, I'll have the last word, though. It's been a long time since I've been here, 12 years, I think, maybe 13. You've always been a quiet leader in that group, even when Dana was here. But the last 4 years, you've kicked it up even a better notch, and our district's much better and prepared for the future because of your leadership. So thank you very much. We'll miss you. And that concludes my recognition.
Okay, thank you. We'll open up for public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to make a comment on anything that is not on the board agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Zini does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak.
Okay, now we'll move forward on the communications. General Manager.
Nothing today.
Okay, Clerk.
Nothing today.
Board of Directors.
Yes, Director Anzini, I attended the Farm Bureau dinner this weekend. A little warm out there. It was an outside event, but the Farm Bureau is very appreciative of all the support they get from El Dorado Irrigation District. So it's my honor to represent us.
And I appreciate you going there because I bought a ticket 2 years ago and they finally said it was available and I just could not make it yesterday at all. So thank you for representing us. Almost called you.
Director, Chief?
Yes.
El
Director
Jefe?
Osborne. Director Osborne.
Couple things. I went up to firefighters camp out up in Eagle Lake in Lhasa National Forest this last week. But driving up there, people don't understand how fortunate we are. Honey Lake is dry. I mean, nothing. There's another lake south of that, and I'm not sure the name of that one, but it's dry. Eagle Lake is low. And so we have been very fortunate that our reservoirs are at or near capacity or even spilling. So I think that all of our efforts with their infrastructure and water rights acquisitions over the years and everything has really paid off. Other thing was, it was interesting that this, in the Special Districts magazine, it says, wildfire season is coming, is your day prepared? Well, I was instrumental in drawing up the fire safe regulations in 1991, and I'm thinking, do government agencies really need to be reminded that they have to take care of clearances and all the other things around their property? I thought that was kind of interesting. It's been 31 years ago since they went into effect, and they've been modified and strengthened since then. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting thing that government entities should have known what the hell they should have been doing all this time. That's it.
Well, thank you, Director Osborne. Director Day, anything? I would like to report. I attended the Mountain County Water Resources Association conference that we had over in El Dorado Hills. It was very impressive. There was about 35 different water agencies from around California, even from the Bay Area, Most of these county water agencies have some impact in the mountains. There's a lot of directors who came up on the tour. It was a Caldor Fire Tour event, and that really brought quite a few people up to do the tour. I want to congratulate Dan Corcoran for being an excellent tour guide and presenting the evidence that shows that, the damage that Caldor has had. It was fascinating to those who have not experienced fire. There were several other agencies, Sonoma Water Agency, that had a lot to say regarding their fire issues. The water agencies that I met, most of them all have a great depth of dealing with CAL FIRE, dealing with fire agencies, and that kind of strength makes it better for water agencies in the mountain counties. There was a lot of feedback from it on excellent speakers that were there, including Wade Crowfoot, who is the Secretary of Natural Resources appointed by our governor. And he did a very impressive presentation regarding what they're doing for fire suppressant, on how they're dealing with collaboration with the U.S. Forest Department and with the CAL FIRE. And if any of you caught 60 Minutes on Sunday night, there was a big expose on the Caldor Fire and how the news crews came into watching how the CAL FIRE was in the operation of all the different agencies. And, you know, when you make that comment, that's assuming new people coming in know about CAL FIRE. They don't. And there are new water agency board members that are coming in who are learning a new experience of what this is all about. And of course, with the wildfire issues that we have, I think it's commendable that our water agency does so much collaboration with SPI, who, by the way, is got over 2 million acres of forest land in California and Oregon and Washington. And they've shut down any park access as of last night to prevent wildfire camping or anything that could cause a problem. But the collaboration between the agencies is important, and it needs to continue. And I am really, really impressed with our staff who does that. And some of them came from some of those agencies. So that gives us a bonus. And I got a better in-depth impression as now I'm on a board of directors for the Mountain County Water Agencies, meeting those different people who have been on that board for a while. But the collaboration was really, really good. And the next meeting will be in Murphy's in October. So I'll be attending that. But congratulations on our whole team, because El Dorado Hills, El Dorado County looked very good in the whole 3 days that we were there. So thank you. That's what I have to report. Approve the consent items. There's been a request to pull item number 5 on the consent calendar, and we'll acknowledge that. So what is your needs here, board?
Well, I'll move the consent calendar absent item 5.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and second to approve items number 1 through 4. Okay.
Actually, it would be 1 through 6 minus 5.
Oh, I didn't turn my page. So, yeah, 6
It's the
minus
full
5.
consent calendar minus item number 5.
Thank you.
And we'll discuss that after.
Okay. Any members from the public who want to speak on any of these items that are on the consent calendar, with the exception of 5?
President Enzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's consent calendar.
Okay. What is let's go ahead and vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries.
All right. Item number 5. Director Dwyer.
Thank you, Director Anzini. I thought it was important to pull this out of the consent calendar and for us to daylight the issue and make sure that it receives the attention it deserves. I don't disagree with the recommendation or findings in there. I think what's important is that this is a request from a developer, actually a requirement, for us to do a hazard or nuisance abatement study for the Deer Creek wastewater treatment plant, which will be very near to this new development if and when it ever gets approved. So it's a proactive thing on our part to participate in this. It's being totally paid for by the potential developer, so EID is not subsidizing any development, and it's us being responsible neighbors. I would like to know if we've received any complaints from the other adjacent neighborhoods about odors. That would primarily be Cameron Park Estates, I think. Have we received complaints from those residents?
Good morning, Mike Brink, Supervisor of Development Services. I think you're talking about item number 6, Director Dwyer?
Yes.
Not item 5.
No,
Number
5.
5.
Sorry. I just had the old agenda.
Yeah.
We have Tracy Crane here from Collections Operations Manager. We're not aware of any complaints. I'm not aware of any complaints, and Tracy indicated to me there aren't
Okay.
any complaints. There's really no receptors around the Deer Creek plant now.
Right, because it's down and it's quite a ways away from.
Yeah, there's really no residential
Right.
development.
Okay, just a question. So I think it's appropriate for us to participate and actually lead this effort with the developer paying for it. That way we can help assure that the contractor does fully disclosure on the issues. And just a side note, I know Mr. Crane and the collections group have, wastewater treatment group, have worked really hard on the El Dorado Hills treatment plant to try to mitigate any odor issues that come from that plant. So maybe there's some lesson learned there that we could apply if we need to in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I'll move approval of.
Could I make one comment?
Can we put it on?
Unless it's a question, let's wait until there's first and second
Okay.
before you
We need
make
to
a
get
comment.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
I'll move option 1.
And I'll second it. Now, Director
Well,
Osborne.
it was interesting that we brought this as on the agenda. Yesterday, I was confronted by some people who were concerned about the number of homes that are being built in Diamond Springs. And they said, you guys shouldn't be allowing this. I said, wait a minute, we are not a land management planning agency. By law, we have to supply if we have the supplies. It's not our job, it's the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors' job, not the EID's job to approve or disapprove of development. So I just thought maybe, had a long discussion about this. Well, and then they talked about the building in El Dorado Hills and then Folsom. I said, we have nothing to do with this stuff. So anyway, just thought I'd make a comment.
Okay. Yes, Director Day.
Yeah, to kind of to piggyback on that, and then also an additional comment is, we may want to look at in the newsletter, Facebook, next door, doing a short story discussing, and I think we had looked into this and gathered the data last year about how many homes are being built in El Dorado County. Not that many, especially compared to Sacramento County and Folsom in particular. And I think it might be useful for us to highlight that, to help differentiate what's going on here versus just across the border in Folsom. And then I do want to compliment our treatment staff, because both I drive around El Dorado Hills a great deal, and the wastewater treatment plant did have some on and off issues with odors, and I have not heard it from anybody, any complaints. I myself have not noticed anything, and I drive by early in the morning, which seemed to be the time when it was, most likely to happen, and it seems to be operating pretty nicely. And the same thing with, there's a pumping station up in the summit off of the north end of Francisco, and that seems to be operating very well. So anyhow, my compliments to you guys and gals.
Yeah. Thank you
And
very
women, I'm
much.
sorry.
Tracy's in charge of that, and he's done a fine job, but it's also a compliment to the board to give us the funding to fix those things. So it's a team effort.
Are there any members from the public that want to speak to this item?
It does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to comment on consent calendar item number 5, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Anzini. Believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Okay. So that ends the consent calendar. Now we'll move on to the public hearing. This is brought to us by engineering.
We will open the public hearing at 9:22 a.m.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Nicole Graham, and I'm the Environmental Compliance Supervisor here at the district. I'm here today to present to the board for approval the 2022 Triennial Public Health Goal Report for the main water system. Previous board actions, some of you might remember me. The board adopted the 2019 Triennial Public Health Goal Report for drinking water in the main water system. So some of you might remember me speaking before, and this might look a little bit familiar. The summary of the issues are the California Health and Safety Code requires public water systems with at least 10,000 connections prepare this type of report. The PHG report is due every 3 years. The 2022 Public Health Goal Report is due July 1st of this year. And the law requires that there be a public hearing, which is why I'm here before you. And also requires the public be able to comment on the report. And so we published in the Mountain Democrat on May 27th and the district website about this public hearing. This law also requires board approval. A little bit of background is this report is in addition to the information that we already provide in our annual water quality report, also known as the Consumer Confidence Report. The report addresses any contaminant detected above any contaminants detected above a PHG from 2019 to 2021, so it's 3 years worth of data that we're looking at. The report only addresses contaminants that have an existing California MCL and were detected at a level that exceeds either a PHG or there's no PHG, a federal MCLG. And I know that last bullet has a lot of acronyms, so I'm going to take a few moments to kind of explain some of the important acronyms. The maximum contaminant level, also known as the MCL, is the highest contaminant level allowed in drinking water in California. It's the California enforceable limit. It's the maximum amount that we're allowed to have in our drinking water to provide the customers. It's codified in the California Code of Regulations, and it's set as close to a PHG or an MCLG as economically and technically feasible. The factors that are considered when setting an MCL by California is the analytical detection capability. That means, can a laboratory even see that level that they're asking it to be at? Is there a good treatment technology available? And also considers costs and benefits from utilizing those type of technology. Next slide. In comparison, the public health goal, PHGs, or the maximum contaminant level goals, or MCLGs, are not enforceable goals. The contaminant is set below at any known or expected risk to health. PHGs are established by the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, also known as OHIA, and MCLGs are federal equivalent for PHGs. So those are the goals set by the feds, who are set by US EPA. PHGs and MCLGs are often set very close, set very low levels depending on the established health risks. These levels may be based on theoretical risks, assessments with multiple assumptions and mathematical extrapolations, even though they may not be attainable to measure in the analytical laboratory. So from that last bullet item, they can often be very theoretical and not necessarily very practical, where the California MCLs are more practically based. The reports. So what's required to be in the report? Only contaminants having an MCL and were detected at a level that exceeded either a PHG or an MCLG. So we had to actually have an MCL, and then we had to actually exceed one of those goals. We're also required to talk about the category or type of risk to health that could be associated with each contaminant. That's essentially is it an acute risk or a chronic risk. We need to tell you the numerical public health risk associated with the MCL or and the MCL and the PHG or MCLG, and what are some of the best technology that can be used to reduce that contaminant level. And finally, we need to tell you the cost to install that treatment if it's appropriate and feasible. So that's all the things that are required to be in the report and for the public. So I've told you why I'm here, what's supposed to be in the report, and why I'm supposed to be here. This slide is usually the most important slide. What did we find out, right? What exceedance did we have? So after we looked at the compliance data from 2019 to 2021, that's over 100 constituents that we were monitoring for that were collected by district staff. Only 3 instances of those times did one reportable exceedance happen for the same constituent. So all the things we look for, only one constituent did we find it where it exceeded a goal 3 times. And that was for total coliform, and it exceeded the federal goal, which is 0%. So the vets say you shouldn't see it at all, but California, and there's no PHG for total coliform bacteria, and for MCLs, California says that for a water size, the size of the main water system, we shouldn't see more than 5% in any given month. So let me tell you a little bit more, dig a little bit more into total coliform. So the main water systems, we are required by law to collect 25 samples per week at the same locations. So in 3 years, that's close to 4,000 samples. So that's a lot of samples that we collected. If we only get 1 positive in a given month, that's a 1% positivity rate for that month. So if you remember, the goal was 0 at the feds. So 1 sample will get us above 0. But for California, we can't exceed more than 5% in a given month. So we were well below the MCL of 5%, but we did exceed that goal of 0%. In 2020, on 2 separate occasions, we had an initial sample that tested positive. And in 2021, we had 1 instances where initial sample tested positive. I want to tell you a little bit more about that weekly bacteria monitoring that we're doing. So when we take a sample at those same sites, 25 samples per week, if we get a positive, we are required to go and take confirmation samples. We usually get those results within about 24 to 48 hours from the laboratory. Within 24 hours of that notification, we go back to that original site where we had a total positive. We take a sample there again, and we go upstream within 5 service connections and downstream within 5 service connections. And we want to make sure that we don't get a positive again. If we do, we need to keep looking to figure out what's going on. When we took those confirmation samples, they all came back negative. The issue's closed. So out of 4,000 samples, 3 times we had a positive. We go back, it's not there again. So sometimes the next kind of question that kind of comes up is,
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, given those numbers and the magnitude of the no indicator in the sample, do you anticipate that was a false positive in the?
often we do.
Okay.
And the next slide, I might tell you a little bit more about that test.
Okay.
But there's the first question we always get, which is why did we even get that positive in the first place? And that's kind of what this slide is going to tell you, is why would we might have gotten that first positive in the first place? So total coliform first is a surrogate indicator used to identify the possibility of waterborne pathogens, which are organisms that could cause waterborne disease. And the key word there is a surrogate indicator. Total coliform isn't necessarily a pathogen, but it's a surrogate that there may be a pathogen there. It's commonly found in nature. It's generally considered not harmful, and it's used because it's really easy to monitor for and really easy to analyze for. And there's no specific numerical health risk for total coliform. So sometimes when we get those, and all water agencies, I've worked for several, we all get this sort of occasional total coliform sample in those initial samples. We usually attribute it to, it's always easy to say sample error because it's commonly found. Could be an issue with the sampling station that we use, that it wasn't properly cleaned and they needed to take a few extra minutes. It could be a laboratory error. It could be a contaminated bottle that they didn't realize that the bottle was contaminated. Things just happen, which is why the law already kind of knows that, or it's already baked into it to allow us to do that confirmation sampling. Okay. So I've told you a little bit about total coliform. So what can we do about? What's the most common treatment technology? In the water industry, the most common treatment technology for total coliform is chlorine. It's a primary treatment technology to ensure drinking water system is safe and free of disease-causing pathogens. The district chlorinates its water at all 3 of our water treatment plants. So we basically chlorinate our water before we serve it to our customers, and then we monitor the residual of that chlorine at the plant, as well as within the distribution system to make sure we have proper levels of chlorine to ensure that we don't have pathogen-causing organisms in the water system. Next slide. Other best practices employed are having an effective and robust cross-connection control program. If you're not really familiar with the district's cross-connection control program, that's essentially assuring that water, once it leaves our water meter, doesn't flow back into our water supply, so that, because we can't ensure that it's still safe to drink. So we have probably 2,000 backflow prevention assemblies that we test annually to make sure they're working, plus many other things we do to ensure the water is safe to drink and not flowing backwards. We have an effective water quality monitoring and surveillance program. When I told you that we take, essentially monitor in a 3-year period 100 different constituents. We monitor weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, and triennially for so many different things. We have a really strong, robust surveillance program. And we also maintain a positive pressure in the distribution system. That's basically ensuring that water doesn't flow back into our main water system and maybe contaminate other people. So those are some of the things that we're doing to make sure that our water is safe from total coliforms. So this is my favorite slide, which is conclusions and summaries. So for all the different constituents the district monitors for, only one constituent triggered the need for a PHG report. And I consider that a really good news story. The district is taking all the steps described by the State Water Resource Control Board as best available technology, as stated in the regulations for total coliform. So in conclusion, this concludes the required public notice of the reports, and the report is ready for board consideration of any public comments and adoption. Your options to consider are adopting the 2022 Triennial Public Health Goal Report for the drinking water in the main water system, or take another action, or take no action. And staff obviously recommends option 1. And now we have questions either from the board or from the public.
Well, Director Osborne.
Just wondering if in the report, if it would be appropriate under recommendations for future action, which we've already done, but I think some method mentioning of we just piped 3.5 miles of open ditch to assure that our water quality is more some phraseology how to do that. I think it'd be appropriate to show that in the district's ongoing efforts to make sure that our water is safe to drink and everything else, and by eliminating that open ditch, we have reduced the chances of contamination dramatically. Something that, would that be appropriate? I don't know.
Since the report has already been published, I don't know if we can make a modification in this existing report, but this report definitely comes every 3 years, so I can make a note to work with other people in the organization to see if maybe we can use this opportunity to profile some special projects that were done in that 3-year period.
Yeah,
And I'm sure we can certainly do it on other parts of the website, just to make sure people know too.
but, I mean, just a thought, because
Yeah.
we're always looking for ways to make sure that things are in good shape. Okay, thanks.
Anybody else has a comment?
Question? No, I think it's good. and
Right
excellent.
now, we're just having questions, and then
Well,
once we get.
I'll move option 1 and just compliment you, and I know a lot goes into this year-round process, and thank you, excellent job.
Thank
I'll second.
All right, so now we have a motion and a second to approve item, option 1, right? To accept the report? Correct? Okay. Just a comment, and it's kind of like counterintuitive what Director Osborne said, that before we say we're proud of this because we covered some ditches, we should have that other report available for people to compare the previous triennial, because it wasn't covered then, and before we make that kind of blanket statement. Because, you know, my concerns are we really being transparent? And, you know, I haven't compared the two of them, and it's considerable of what we did, but it would be nice to see if that truly was the truth. So, to compare them. That's the only thing I have to comment.
President Anzini, could I just make
Yes.
a comment? And that is, in response, Director Osborne, to your question, I just, I think, I like the way Nicole handled it. I just wanted to point out that this particular report is a statutory requirement that the
Right.
district, and the statute that Nicole referenced in the Health and Safety Code is very specific about what the report contains. You'll notice the report is attached to the board packet, and as Nicole indicated, it was published and made publicly available in advance of today's public hearing. There's not a section in that report that, you know, where the district discusses its you know, all of the myriad things that we do to ensure our water quality. The report follows very carefully the statutory criteria that's required to be in there. So I concur with Nicole. It wouldn't be appropriate to list that in the report itself, but certainly, as you just did, and as the district does very often, highlighting the projects that we undertake to ensure public health and safety in our drinking water system is appropriate and can be done in the meeting today associated with the adoption of this report and elsewhere.
That's why it's called a triennial. You don't have to do this every year. Otherwise, we need two of you. So, any public comments? Questions for the presenter? Anybody online?
It does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on public hearing item number 7, option 1, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer. We are ready for a vote.
Okay.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Okay. This closes the public hearing. Now we'll move on to information item, operations. Mr. Corcoran.
Move the microphone the other way here. So.
Oh, goody.
Well, good morning, President Z, members of the board. I have another, fortunately, positive news update on our water supply situation. I thought it'd be apt to start with a photo of a partially frozen Lake Aloha as of May 31st. It's finally thawed out, but last week. I have another photo from actually Friday for you. The watershed keeps on giving, I think is the summary of our today's presentation. Just for perspective, on the far left there, mostly submerged, obviously, is the Aloha main dam. You may recall from your presentation you received in the spring of 2020, staff had done some extensive maintenance on that dam. So it's about 7,800 feet. Slide 2, please. So just a quick summary of the issues. All of our upper reservoirs are now, as you just saw, that was the last one there, are full. Jacobson Lake remains on target to meet our end of season carryover. We did have a few curtailments, although they didn't have a material effect on our water supply situation. I'll describe those in a little more detail here, and those curtailments are implemented by the State Water Resources Control Board as it works to allocate water supply in California during the drought. We're definitely well positioned to meet our unconstrained demands really for 2022, while also preparing in the event that 2023 does turn out to be dry. And you'll see in our presentation today, I'd say we're leaning more in that direction than away from that direction, but we're prepared for that. And definitely, we've seen a decrease in demand over the past 3 months, which, could be attributed to a series of factors, which we'll describe. Next slide, please. Okay, and we don't need to review these in detail because you see on the far right, pretty much everything is full in our upper watershed. Jacobson Lake is right on the 80% that we've been managing associated with our transfer, leaving our water high in the watershed and moving it down over the course of the summer as part of our strategic management of our integrated system. And you'll see there, Folsom Reservoir is really the only reservoir in the Central Valley project that did fare well this year. It topped out around, I think, 864,000 and is now decreasing as the Bureau makes its discretionary releases. Next slide, please. So really, one of the main things that changed the situation for us is that late spring precipitation, April. Obviously, we all remember after breaking out the sunscreen and flip-flops, we did have a nice normal April. And then even as of last week, in fact, this weekend, these thunderstorms make a material benefit to the district, being in the upper watershed, having our reservoirs overlaying bedrock, and then being in the area where we do get that monsoonal moisture coming out of the Four Corners and backing over the Sierra. Weber Reservoir, it remains full. It's not anticipated to be needed this year, but we do have that there in the event that does happen. We moved a total of 238 acre-feet through Hazel Creek Tunnel. That's all we needed this year. We probably didn't even need that if we had 20/20 hindsight of April's storm coming through. But that just really shows what a material difference the spring has made. So local runoff, in fact, we're still having about 8 CFS coming through the Camp Creek Tunnel even today. So we're really maximizing the canal for hydropower generation. Reservoir 1 remains at its lowest demand possible, and we're meeting majority of the east side demand through Slide Park. So we're really only meeting from kind of upper Slide Park Road down to Cedar Grove is the only area that Res 1 is meeting. Slide Park's meeting the rest of the service area. And that's just because we have plenty of water available, frankly, in Slide Park to do that. Next slide, please. So our famous noodle graph here. So as you can see, our two lines are that close together, and that just shows we really remember how we started the spring, how divergent we were, showing the importance of having Hazel Creek Tunnel. We were ready to do that, but fortunately, the spread between those two lines is now being transferred to hydroelectric generation. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, Folsom Reservoir did top out at 90%, but if you go on there today, you'll see it's doing what we anticipated. It's dropping fairly quickly, and that's as the Bureau both makes its minimum public health and safety releases for its customers, as well as meeting the Delta outflow requirements, because Lake Shasta, that normally contributes pretty significantly to that, is critically low this year. So we do plan to rely solely on local supplies and really solely on Project 184 local supplies and not needing our Weber and ditch rights at Folsom Reservoir this year. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we did definitely have we've moved that line, and you'll see in our next slide how significantly our demand pattern has changed over the past couple months. We really kind of attribute that to 3 factors. One, obviously, first being our outreach and our conscious effort by our customers to conserve, as well as those late season thunderstorms that even came all the way down the hill, really reducing the irrigation demand on a lot of our customers, as well as our smart irrigation and that mild weather. We had a really mild 30, 45 days there. Not last week, but prior to that, a nice mild late spring there. So overall, we were down. Our final numbers were 30% for May, year over year, and about 21%. It may go up a little bit. Last week was a little hot. This week, through tomorrow, hot, but probably around 21% down year over year for June. And in fact, we're even lower than 2020 by 3 and 6%. So really shows significant difference. And we anticipate that, next slide, to continue, maybe a little bit less. So as you can see, just for the benefit of the public, 2020 is our current year line, that solid red. We've really crossed, they're all together with the past couple years. So we're back to what I would classify as sort of a normal demand pattern. As you can see earlier this year, obviously the very dry spring, we were ahead of last year, but now we've gone back and actually crossed below 2020 for last month and potentially into next month. Because these are conservative demand projections, we did show in July and August, perhaps increasing a little bit, but that may not be the case, but we're always planning to make sure we have that water available for our customers. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we did have a few curtailments that went into effect a couple weeks ago, that being for the license rights at Jacobson Lake. So Jacobson Lake is comprised of 3 rights, 2 license rights that came with the acquisition of Jacobson Lake from the Bureau of Reclamation that have a priority date post-1914, a license right. And then we do have pre-14 rights for 12.5 CFS, a direct diversion, which we continue to exercise there. We also, our permitted right from the State Board from Outingdale was also curtailed. So what does that mean? So once again, in coordination with the State Board, we've went ahead and increased our releases from Jacobson Lake equivalent to the maximum demand from Outingdale to allow us to continue to divert there. So we've kind of swapped water with State Board approval. And we continue to operate in lieu, basically, and operate Outingdale Water Treatment Plant as normal. Our staff went out there Thursday or Friday, and we're still measuring about 27 cubic feet per second in the Middle Fork of Sumas, which is good. You'll see next month we will have a hauling contract in the event that's necessary, but we're hoping it'll definitely be shorter, and we're hoping not to get it all. But if we do have to haul, it'll be shorter than last year. Last year we started hauling about the 3rd week of July, so much different situation in that watershed. We're watching it closely. As you recall, about a third of that watershed did burn, not as significantly as Sly Park. So there's a variety of factors. There's not trees drinking water, but there's not that cover soil, topsoil, holding back some of that water for us. So we're going to see how the watershed reacts. No other water rights are curtailed. As we get in mid to late summer, we will be operating from storage for permit 2012 down at Folsom, so we don't anticipate any material effects of curtailments at this point in time. So prevailing weather. As I mentioned, we continue to have a nice spring after a really rough first quarter of the year. But we are looking at probably even slightly increasing probability of drier conditions going into next year. That doesn't mean that we're supply constrained necessarily. In fact, it's very similar to the conditions that we experienced this year. And as you can see right now, we're doing quite well in our supply situation. We're able to fill our reservoirs, and it's not necessarily worsening supply, but it's just to be aware of the chance of lower than average precipitation. Next slide, please. There we go. And these are yet more models, more spaghetti lines here. And this is from the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center. Last month's chart is to the left, and this chart released on June 9th. As you can see, our kind of long-term average, the solid lines, these are all various models. There's about a half a degree Celsius in the Eastern Pacific, so slight La Nina conditions. Now, as you can see, going into the fall and early winter, it's actually going down even a little bit more. It's a little bit cooler, the models. But the 2 farthest noodles, if you will, as you see, they're quite divergent. So what that tells me looking at is, I really don't know. I mean, this far out, yeah. So I don't put too much into this, but it just shows that,
like poles.
if the lines were getting closer together, it increased certainty, obviously be a little more concerned, but that far out, I mean, it could be, at that point, I wouldn't say a mild, an average El Nino year, just as easy as it could be extreme La Nina when you get into next spring.
Right.
But we're going to continue to watch this. Next slide, please. And then we want to make sure we always are keeping track of the governor's executive orders. The board had received an update regarding the March executive order, and in that order had directed the State Board to consider adopting those regulations. You took action in late May. Their adoption the next day was consistent with your action in late May, and that is equivalent measured up to 20%, and that's why it was warranted to maintain stage 1 for the district. Next slide, please. Obviously, we continue our outreach effort, even though our conditions have improved. There is a state-mandated conservation, obviously, across. In our most recent waterfront that'll go out next week, we have some irrigation awareness. Obviously, this is the main irrigation season, so trying to have that be main topic in some of the material that Jesse's putting out now. We don't talk about smart irrigation, and most importantly was the action that the State Board took in May was that directed letter to our non-residential customers regarding non-functional turf irrigation prohibition, and that was a statewide regulation. And that went out probably two or so weeks ago, Jesse? Yeah, about 2 weeks ago. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the board did reaffirm excuse me, I wanted to just have a quick slide here just to talk about water transfer coordination and the action that you took at the last meeting. So we obviously, in late May, we reaffirmed that the 15% voluntary conservation was appropriate given the district's water supply conditions, which continue to honestly even get a little bit better every thunderstorm that comes through. So we do have improved conditions for our supplies, and that our portfolio is necessary to meet not only this year, but next year if it does remain dry. And at the same time, we have the ability to help other water suppliers that are unfortunately not anywhere near the situation that we're in this year, and give us some non-rate revenue for, we're asking our customers to voluntarily conserve, but the last thing we want to do is send that water downstream, and there's no beneficial use to the district. So this provides that opportunity without constraining our supplies for next year. So we did have our supplies from Weber Reservoir that, if necessary, we always have the ability to use per our agreement, but at this time we're not planning to need it, so it's water that would otherwise spill next winter. And then our conserved water from the main ditch. I know you had the opportunity to talk about that in detail at the last meeting. So neither of those supplies impact our ability to meet our supplies this year or next year at this time. Last slide. And I thought the last slide, this slide is actually from Friday, believe it or not, at Lake Aloha. So that's Pyramid Peak on the left, so looking back towards what would be the north, primarily the north. Some of those snowdrifts are still 6 feet deep. So we sent our staff in there to increase the outlet to 25 cubic feet per second, and we're just holding steady. So there's about 25 CFS of snow runoff still coming into Lake Aloha as of this morning. So it just shows you, even though I thought it'd be nice to show a little bit of snow with how hot it is outside. So up country, it's still quite spring up there. So any questions?
Director Osborne.
Coming across Echo Summit on Saturday, it was pouring, I mean pouring. And so I think probably that snow has probably vanished because it was a warm rain, but there was a lot of water coming into Echo and Aloha Lakes.
Yeah. The canal did go to full canal early in the morning on Sunday from that thunderstorm. It's dropped back off to about 70% full, but yeah, we're doing well. If you need a few more of those in the next week or two to continue to help us.
You're coming.
Yeah, Dan, on the slide, the recent demand trends, year over year, our customers have, if I'm reading this correctly, have conserved quite a bit. I mean, part of that was the weather, as you pointed out. Is that what the state is looking at year over year, or?
The state looks at that sub-bullet as compared to 2020, and so that's why we were, I think, 6 and 3%, or 3 and 6% below 2020. But we, it's as we've described many times, our customers even prior to 2020 had that hardened conservation. So we like to recognize every conservation effort, not just compared to 2020. So that's why.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that, the permanent conservation that our customers have made since the last drought, combined with the current conservation, would be more like 33 and 36%.
Right.
If you compare that to pre-last drought.
Right.
So I think that's important for us to recognize.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
And save your trees.
Right.
I'm fanatic about that.
Yeah, we did talk about that in detail in the May-June waterfront specifically. Those important investments.
Yep.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah, when we were on our tour on Thursday, we went all the way up to the top of Ice House Road and showed the tour groups of those 2 buses that we had. And it was raining on us. It was a dusting of wetness, not a full-fledged shower, but it was kind of nice to have that. And then drop down into the valley and come home, it's 105. So it was a big deal. Yes. So are any members of the public want to ask questions regarding this information item?
Just as a reminder, if members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instruction on page 2 of today's agenda. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 8.
All right, there's no action required. This is an information item. So thank you very much. Now we'll move on to action items. Item number 9, finance.
I'll move option 1.
Second.
Okay, motion and seconded by Director Dwyer and Director Jay to move item number 9 on finance. Any members from the public wish to comment on this?
President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 9, option 1, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer. I believe we are ready for the vote.
Then let's vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Okay, item number 10, finance. You're up, Mr. Pasqualello. I think I said that right.
Close.
Close. You can, yeah, we call him Tony. Well, you know.
Sorry.
With the pointer?
Okay, good morning, board, members of the public. My name is Tony Pasquarello, and I'm the Finance and Accounting Manager here at the district. And today, I will be presenting the results of our 2021 annual audit. Next slide. Previous board action, the board receives and follows the annual audit and report on applying agreed upon and the report on applying agreed upon procedures related to the appropriations limit each year. Oh, it's over here. The auditor's responsibility is to express an opinion on the financial statements based on their audit, and also issue a report on internal controls, compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grant agreements. So what I'll do is I'm going to present just an overview summary of our financial statements, and then also have our managing partner, auditor from Mays and Associates, come up and address any questions and make additional comments. So, starting off with our audit of our financial statements. They comprise of an independent auditor's report, and Mays and Associates, our auditor, issued an unmodified clean opinion that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the district as of December 31st, 2021 and 2020, and the respective changes in financial position and cash flows for the fiscal years. This unmodified opinion is the highest level of assurance that an auditor can provide. So what that means is that we did not have any audit findings.
Yeah, Tony, if I could, in the 4 years I've been here, I think we've had 4 unmodified or clean audits by 2 different audit companies. And that just speaks so well for the financial management that we have here. So thank you.
Thank you. So some highlights for 2021. The total assets and deferred outflows exceeded the total liabilities and deferred inflows by $467.7 million. It's referred to as the net position equity of the district. That was an increase of $31.7 million from 2020. Our total capital assets, not including depreciation or net of accumulated depreciation, total $811 million, which increased $48.2 million from the prior year. Our operating revenues decreased $3.6 million, about 5%, to $68.3 million. So that decrease is as a result of lower hydro sales, and we did not have any water transfer sales in 2021, where we did have $2.8 million in 2020. And our property taxes revenue increased $0.5 million relatively flat to 14.5 million. Continuing, our FCCs were 16.5 million, increase of 6.9 million from the prior year. And the breakdown of that 16.5 million is water was 9.6 million and wastewater was 6.9 million. Operating expenses, excluding depreciation, decreased 2 million or 3.5% to 55.3 million. The district's debt service coverage ratio, including FCCs, was 2.68. It's an increase of 0.45 from the prior year. And as a reminder, our required bond covenant minimum for the district is 1.25. So we, more than double debt. The debt service coverage ratio, not including FCCs, was 1.83. That's an increase of 0.05 from the prior year. And our internal test minimum for that ratio without FCCs is 1.0. So as of December 31st, 2021, the district has recovered approximately $8.5 million through insurance claims related to the Caldor fire. So that's as of December 31st. As of today, we've received an additional $2.5 million. So a total of $11 million, and we're still working with the insurance companies on the full, our claims and seeing exactly how much we're going to receive. Actual operating revenues of $68.3 million, we're $0.3 million higher than budget, so right on budget. The operating expenses, actual operating expenses, not included in the non-cash, non-budget year-end accruals, were $52.2 million, so it's 4.8 lower than budget. And our FCC revenue of $16.5 million is about $0.2 million lower than budget, so right on budget. So now I'm going to just give a high-level review of our statements in net position for the for 2021 and 2020. And this is what's commonly known as the balance sheet in the private sector. And this is it's a snapshot in time as of the end of the year, December 31st, 2021. Just some highlights. Here's total assets, increase of $18.3 million to $971.2 million. Our total liabilities, $500 million, a decrease of $13 million. And so there's our total net position of the district of $467.7 million. So it's the equity components of the district. And looking at the specific utilities, there's a breakdown of our assets and liabilities and net position of the water fund. So it's about $290 million, and the wastewater is $177 million net position for the district. So focusing on the specific categories that's we want to keep an eye on and for the financial stability of the district. Cash and investments, focusing on that, you can see that from 2021 compared to 2020, we had a reduction of $24 million total cash. That's primarily driven by the restricted cash, $42 million reduction, and that's a result of our 2020 bond proceeds. So we're utilizing our 2020 bond proceeds and for paying for those specific water projects that were identified in that bond issue. And it's the breakdown of the water cash and the wastewater cash. And as you can see, the reduction is primarily in the water, where the restricted cash from last year reduced down to here, and our operating cash has increased. Now looking at our capital assets. So our capital assets in total increased from in 2021 by $72 million. And primarily the drivers are in construction in progress and water plant in service. So again, this is a snapshot in time. So as of December 31st, the construction in progress was much higher, and a lot of that is because of the construction that was going on for the Caldor fire, and a lot of construction projects at the end of the year. Some highlights of the major ones, a big component of the increase is $14.5 million for the Flume 44 canal conversion, $2.6 million for developer capital contributions at Bell Ranch, $2.5 million for Pacific Tunnel rehab, and $2.1 million for South Point lift station upgrades, and $1.6 million for Easy Street water line replacement. Looking at our debt portfolio, annual decrease of $14.4 million, and this is our total outstanding debt of $339 million. And there's really the only activity that we had in 2021 was just our required debt service principal reduction. And primarily is 2016A is where we had a lot of principal payments due. The historical view of our portfolio over the last 5 years, through, as you're aware of all the refundings that we went through with the with the rates in the market, we did a tremendous job of reducing our portfolio down to $280 million in 2019. And then we had our big bond sale of $61 million to increase. So we're doing a great job of managing our portfolio, taking advantage of market rates. And of course, 2022, we issued our pension bond. So our portfolio is going to increase for our debt, but our unfunded liability obviously will be reduced. Looking over the next 5 years for our debt service. So this is our required debt service. As you can see, over the next 5 years, our annual debt service will be increasing. Primarily in 25 and 26 is when we will see an increase in our principal payments for 2 bond issues. In 2025, will be our last payment for the 2014A bond issue. So after 25, we won't have that bond issue anymore. And then in 2026 is when our 2016B bond issue starts. That's when we start being required to pay down our principal, whereas prior years since 2016, it's just been interest payments.
Tony, before you leave that chart, certainly we're concerned about our total debt, as we should be. But I think it's important to note a couple of things. One is the change in the blue bar, the ratio of what we're paying off of principal versus the red bar, which is our interest portion of the payments. And you see they flip-flop, that we're paying way more off of principal in the next few years than we were previously, and a lot less in interest. And I guess you'll probably get to it, but the actual debt service payments for 22 mainly, and beyond, have decreased even with the increased debt. So I think it's a pretty good picture.
We purposely manage our outlook of our portfolio to have when principal payments are due versus interest to keep so we don't have rate shock.
I'd like to add to that where, the common folk could say, okay, you get a credit card with 0% and you have a credit card with 17. Pay off your bills with the 0%, and you do manage to save a little bit more money. So that's basically the concept of what we did. So.
Except it wasn't 0%.
Our net pension liability, again, this is as of December 31st, 2021, so it's prior to the bond we issued a few months ago, or actually a month ago. Our total pension liability is $190 million, with an increase by $8.2 million from the prior year. And this is our fiduciary net position. So these are our assets that we have contributed, investment returns in the market to reduce our total liability. So the total net pension liability as of 12/31/20 is $51.3 million. And as you can see, the big driver of 2021 was the investment returns in the market. 2021, and this is where the CalPERS management team is managing the portfolio for investment returns, had a tremendous year. And so we've ended up being 73%, quote unquote, funded, as of this point. And that on the right side is the assumptions that were used by actuary for determining that future liability. And you could see that they decreased our inflation, which next year, Yeah, we're gonna have that number change, I think. You know, and our payroll growth with a little increase, and the investment, the discount rate reduced from 7.25 to 7.15. And that's a result, if you recall, whenever there's a great year, we start reducing the discount rate. Or not we, but the CalPERS. And our total employees covered increased slightly. That's the breakdown between the inactive employees and the active employees. So that was our pension. Now our OPEB, our post-retirement medical benefits. Same calculation, total OPEB liability of $36.2 million, a $3.5 million increase from the prior year. And our fiduciary net position of $13.8 million, and with an increase of $3 million from the prior year. The major driver is the investment income. Different actuary. We have an actuary firm out of Southern California, very reputable firm that we've used for the prior 5 years or so. That firm is who handles our liability calculations, similar to how CalPERS does for the pension. So net OPEB liability of $22.4 million, and the fiduciary percentage is 38.1 of the total liability, 38.1%. Yes. Oh, bless you. Oh, I thought you said question.
That too.
Okay, statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in that position. I have a high-level summary of that for the prior 2 years. This is what's commonly referred to as the income statement in the private sector. High level, total revenues, $93.9 million, with essentially flat from the prior year. Operating revenues down by $3.6 million. Non-operating revenues increased $3.2 million. Non-operating revenues on the right side comprise of property taxes, other income, surcharges, and then the operating revenues are primary sources of revenue from our utilities and hydroelectric and recreation. Total expenses decreased $2.6 million to $90 million. It gives us a net income before capital contributions of roughly $4 million. Adding in capital contributions of FCCs and developer contributions of $28 million. Total change in net position, change in equity of $31.7 million. Oh, actually, I just wanted to comment on one item. Was from the last board meeting when we went over when Jamie presented the Q1 financial forecast report and everything. And there was a question from you, Director Manzini, President Manzini, about property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So just to clarify, we will know in September of 2022 what our revised, renewed property tax estimate is, because that's when the county will come out. They will issue the revenue estimate letters. And so we will receive that in September, and that's when we will be able to really give a good indicator of how our property taxes may or may not have shifted.
I don't think it was me, but that's okay.
Oh, I thought it was.
I think it was,
Okay.
I don't know, maybe not. It might have.
Okay. Looking at our expenses, the operating and non-operating expenses, total expenses increased or decreased by $2 million to $55.3 million, not including the pension and OPEB accruals. They're not non-cash, non-budgeted expenditures that we put accruals on our books, was $52.2 million. And the primary drivers, personnel expenses decreased $4 million. Administration and repair services were the other increases to give a net $2 million. And our non-operating expenses, that reduction is primarily due to not issuing any debt in 2021, so where we did in 2020 for the debt issuance costs. So operating income excluding depreciation and amortization, it's just this calculation is good because it's a measure of financial performance to show profitability and ongoing business operations, to see how well we're doing with just operation revenue, not including our non-operating revenue and expenses. Decrease of 1.6 million to 13 million in 2021, and excluding depreciation and amortization, that is 16.1 million. So that's essentially the summary of our financials, and now kind of focusing on some ratio analysis. Good indicator to see how we compare in the industry, and just kind of level sets us. So I did add this slide after the board packet, but I just wanted to, since I do compare ourselves to Moody's and S&P, I thought it would be just a quick reminder of the different credit rating tiers. And this is Moody's breakdown: prime, prime debt, high grade, upper medium, and essentially almost like junk debt. And we are right here in Moody's. We're rated AA, or A(a)(3), and AA-. So we're in the high grade area, and we've been rated this way for many years, maybe 7-8 years or so, and and even in the 2022 bond issue that we just recently did, we were stable. We were rated as stable, the same ratings.
And for the general public, this is kind of like a credit score.
Yes, exactly. Instead of Experian, we have Moody's.
Yeah, exactly.
The granddaddy of them all, ratios and calculations, is the debt service coverage. In 2021, that calculation was 2.68, and that was increased from last year of 2.23. And the breakdown of the calculation is total revenue. So this is total revenues, which includes operating and non-operating, and total expenses is operating and non-operating. And for total district, 51.9 million. Our debt service coverage, or requirements for 2021 were 19.3 million, and that's how the calculation ratio is derived. And then water and wastewater, similar, same ratios or calculations, 2.87, 2.7 for water and wastewater. And these calculations exclude unrealized gains and losses, because it's just a paper gain, paper loss, and then depreciation, interest, and year-end pension accruals. And so in comparison to the total industry of water and sewer utilities, that 2.68 is above the 2.4 national average, or national median. And looking at the different rating categories, where do we sit? And so this is a good measure to look at, is for future bond issues, if we want to increase our credit rating for better interest rates for a future, is how far do we need to go? How far do we need to increase? And so we're right still in the AA category and this is just using Moody's as the reference.
And Tony, before you move that slide, just like to highlight the cash available for capital projects on the left side bottom. That's your pay-go money. So that's, if we want to minimize future debt, we use that for our annual projects, and only hopefully the debt for larger projects. So that's very important to keep a very positive, robust cash available for capital projects.
Especially with the changing financial environment, the opportunities for increased debt may be diminishing for the next few years.
And these, just real quick on our ratings and how these rating firms rate companies, is the financial piece is only 40% of that rating. So there's other factors that go into when a credit agency rates a firm or district. There's other with management and system characteristics and demographics. There's a lot of other factors that they look at, but the 40%, and this is why I focus on these ratios, because obviously they feel that these ratios are an important indicator of financial stability. So why not we compare ourselves accordingly on an annual basis? Because we only get this review done when we go to market. Another ratio that's used by both firms, days cash on hand. It's a measure of liquidity. Do we have enough cash on hand to meet annual expenses and to be able to cope with emergencies or variances from forecasts? So our unrestricted cash and investments annualized, this is the calculation over our operating expenses. So 387 days, and your goal is to have more than 365. Compared to the national median, that 387 is a little bit lower than the national median of 451. And we are below the average or the median of AA, and that's where we're ranked in total, but we're very close. This is a measure that over the last handful of years has been decreasing, I think that what the agencies look at is that we have the capability historically, and so it's not a major factor into our score. It's an asset condition, a system characteristic, so it's a proxy for the age and health of our system, where it stands in the usable life, the remaining useful life of the asset, and it's a signal of underinvestment in capital projects. It's the calculation is the net fixed assets, so of our 811 million as referenced that's net assets after depreciation, and this is annual depreciation, so it's what our depreciation annual that's incurred on an annual basis, 34 years. The national median is 26 years, so it's showing that we are investing in our capital projects. Now, this is kind of it's not an intuitive display of the years, because prime debt is 26 years, 27, 24, and 29. It's like you would think it's almost should be reversed. I don't know, I can't explain why firms that are BBB rated have a higher, they're investing in their capital assets more. Maybe they're, again, this is 40%, total is 40% of their rating, and there's other factors maybe that they technically have done better on. The AAA, it seems like the West Coast has invested more into their capital assets versus the East Coast. And I'm not sure if it's because it's old, New York City and Chicago. There's not a lot of investment into their capital assets. So I'm not sure, but they're highly rated municipalities. I'm not sure if that's a driver or not, but I just find it's kind of interesting.
Director Osborne has a question.
When you put a number on an asset, is it, case in point, the new treatment plant in Folsom and the main ditch? Do you use the contract price as the asset value, or how do you determine that?
The total asset value is going to be any.
I mean, a new project. Well, so how do you put that into the asset column?
You mean like is it like in addition to an existing asset or brand new asset?
The main ditch is a brand new asset. The Folsom intake is a replacement of a previous asset. So how do you differentiate between that?
Well, the value of the asset that we put in our books is going to be accumulation of all expenditures. So it's going to be material, supplies, capitalized labor, contracting costs. So whatever the total cost at the end, when the project's closed out, if it's a $2 million project, it becomes a $2 million asset on our books. And then we depreciate it based off of what's the useful life of that asset. And every category has its own type of useful life, and then we straight line the depreciation for that. Is that the question?
Well, George, let me try that. So when the board approves the project, they approve the contract price.
Right.
Let's say, to the actual contractor, you approve inspection fees, you
Yeah, the
approve
total
capitalized
cost,
labor,
yeah.
which is our staff. All that will go into capitalization on our books.
Okay, but, for example, we're just closing out the rebuild of Four Bay Dam, Four Bay Reservoir, so that wouldn't reflect in the books this year. The new main ditch would not reflect in this report.
No, do you recall the construction in progress line?
Yeah,
So as projects are going, it could be a 5-year project, 3-year project, those expenditures on an annual basis will continue to grow in that construction in progress line. When the project is finally closed,
right.
when it's done, that's when we take whatever that total expenditure in that, the CIP, the construction in progress line, it then becomes an asset.
Okay, it's not counted as an asset until it's actually completed.
Right. So,
Okay.
yeah, that, like that one slide that had all of the water plant and
Yeah.
service and the construction in progress, work in progress line, why it's so high is because a lot of those projects you just mentioned, they haven't closed yet, but they've grown and grown and grown. The Folsom Intake, once that project is 100% complete, and then the engineers will let us know when it's completely done, that's when we will recognize that asset on our books as a tangible hard asset. In the meantime, it's just residing in the construction in progress.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Now,
Yeah,
Director
I
Dent.
just more of a comment that under the asset condition comparison, a number that the 26 years jumped out at me. Frankly, I think it's suspect because that's, when you mentioned the East Coast or the Midwest, the South, Seattle, San Francisco, these are all older areas with a lot of aging infrastructure that they are not caught up on. And yet, the median is supposed to be 26 years. I think it's more of a question of how it's being reported.
Yeah, and that I can't answer, what Moody's and S&P, how they report that. I mean, I don't know how much in depth they dive in, but they use our financials, they use firms' financials and, off of what the numbers are. And maybe through ratings calls with the district or municipality, they kind of maybe dive in deeper. This is a concern, but then maybe the conversation is, well, in 2 years, like you can see in our CIP plan, we're going to be investing in the future. So I don't know. So those previous ratios are ones that are both used by both rating firms, Moody's and S&P. So this is one that only S&P does, and it's kind of another ratio on debt to capitalization, financial leverage ratio, and it's relative financial leverage focusing on the total amount of debt in the company's capital structure, whereas the debt service coverage is just your annual required debt service. So this is you've probably heard of a debt to equity ratio or debt to capital ratio, and it's the total debt divided by your capital of the district, which is debt and net position. So your equity, retained earnings plus debt, that's what's used to invest in capital assets. So that calculation is 41%. It continues to be within the strong range. So this is how S&P ranks what's extremely strong, all the way down to the highly vulnerable. We've been in this area for years, many years, and it's probably, we've been in, close to the middle of it. And compared to other, rated high grade and low grade, so we're right in, doing well. So that finalizes the review of our financials with some industry analysis. And then, so our report on internal controls and compliance. Oh,
Tony, before you move, I just, an observation, maybe it's obvious, but we sit in a very good position on all the ratios except for the age of our assets, and given the questions about how that's calculated. I think that aside, intuitively, we know that there's some outliers. The expected life of the Silver Lake Dam that is probably, was exhausted 50 years ago. And so it might be pulling that average, but it still highlights the fact that we need to continue to invest in our infrastructure wisely to bring them into modern standards.
Agree. So two reports that Mason Associates issue and do an assessment of is internal controls and compliance, and they did not identify any deficiencies in the controls or instances of non-compliance. So positive. Additionally, part of the annual audit is to perform an agreed upon procedures review of our appropriations limit calculation. That's a calculation we do every year after the annual operating budget is adopted, usually in December timeframe. And they did not identify any findings with that calculation. The 2021 single audit report, historically, the single audit, if you recall, while we're bringing the annual audit for receive and file, we also bring a single audit report. For this year, we are subject to 2 single audits. This is for federal grants that exceed $750,000. So Folsom Lake Intake Improvements Project, we exceeded $750,000 of grant reimbursement, and also Upper Main Ditch Piping Project. So those are identified as single audits that that Mason Associates will review. However, it's not due until 9 months after fiscal year, so there's some time, and so I will be coming back when that audit is done, and we're expecting to have that audit performed in July, late July timeframe. So
For those single audits, isn't that $750,000 of receipts per year, which puts you over the limit for that single audit? It's not for the project, it's cash receipts from the federal agency in any single year, is that correct?
expenditures. Yeah.
Pardon?
It's just expenditures. So if accrued expenses, if
Okay.
they exceed $750,000.
But any single year, so there could be a year that we have those projects that we don't reach that 750,000 threshold, we wouldn't need the single audit. Okay, thank you.
So before I invite David Alvey, Managing Partner at Mason Associates, to answer any questions and provide some further commentary, I just want to recognize my staff. We experienced a lot of employee turnover in my department, had retirees and more, other employees with turnover, and so it just was unfortunate it happened towards the end of the year, and so I just want to recognize my staff that they really, assisted and really helped out. I even had our buyers help with getting invoices ready for payment, and so and all the audit schedule is required to provide to the audit firm. So it was just a really great effort by staff, and I just want to publicly recognize their assistance. So.
Morning, Representatives Easy and members of the board. My name is David Alvey, and I'm the audit partner, and we're the new auditors this year. So this is our first year back. But to be known, historically, I was here 8 years ago, 9 years ago. It's working. First hired, so.
I'm sorry, can you hold on for 1 second? Can you make sure that microphone's on, because it does not appear that it's on. Yep. Oh. There you go.
All right, is that better?
Thank you.
Perfect. So my job every year is to come in and issue an audit opinion on the financials we have for you today. And that is typically on page 1 of the annual comprehensive financial report. And I'm pleased to say that it is an unmodified or a clean audit opinion, and that's the highest level assurance we can provide. And I'm not going to get into the financial highlights. Tony did an excellent job of going over how you stand in terms of your financial highlights. And in fact, your debt service coverage ratio, like Tony said, is actually very good compared to even many of the other large municipal special districts that I audit don't have that high of a coverage ratio. So that's a good congratulations on that. We also issue our memorandum on internal controls, and that's my communication to this board of things that we found during the audit. And those can be categorized into 2 ways. A material misstatement, so that means something material can flow through the internal controls and not get caught. We have nothing to report. And the other is significant deficiency, and that something significant can flow through the internal controls and not get caught, and we have nothing to report. And in part of that document, there's a required communication. So I'm here to tell you that we had no difficulties in doing the audit. We had no conflicts with the management's assessments for depreciation, capital assets, OPEB, pension, no disagreements with the accounting treatments of those. And we don't think that management was shopping for an opinion. You know, we're gonna fire me and get another auditor if they didn't like the way the audit panned out. This process really started back in December when we came out and we were doing our internal control testing. And in that time, we're looking at checks and balances, making sure that not a single person can initiate, approve, and book a transaction without some kind of segregation of duty. So it's great to see that we have nothing to report on that in terms of control issues. And with that, I'd like to thank Tony and his staff for all their help and open up to any questions you might have.
I just want to suggest this. This is all very clean and nice and all that, but you guys need to spice it up a little bit. Yeah. We need, hide a little nugget in there this coming year, and let's see if he can find it. I'm just kidding.
Check
Just
the
kidding. I saw Jamie's look. No, I'm just kidding.
one board of director you can check his expense reports.
Noted.
Before we leave the audit and the consolidated financial report, I think there's a couple of things that we didn't see here but are very, very important for all our constituents and ourselves to keep track of. One of those is the number of new connections that was buried in there. As my niece that's a liberal arts major in Oregon would say, oh, it's very numbery. But yeah, there's some numbery pages in there that need attention, and one of them was the new connections over the last 10 years. It's a people's perception, as Director Osborne said, that there's thousands of new homes being built. Where's the water come? The actual reality is there's only about 600 new connections per year. And we have water studies that shows we can sustain that for the next 10, 15 years without additional. So I think it was important to highlight how many new connections do we do. And the other chart that was in there somewhere was the number of connections, which is increasing, like I said, moderately, compared to the number of employees. And the number of connections shows an upward trend, while our number of employees is pretty much stuck at 222 or someplace thereabout. So that just says we're doing more with less, and that's really a hats off to management that's doing more with less and keeping a tight rein on our costs. So thank you.
Actually, that did remind me that I did fail to recognize another employee who was very instrumental in putting out that ACFR together. And that last part of all those statistical tables, that is, I don't put those together, and that's by Becky Belgram. And she works with all engineers and counties. She tabulates all that data, and she helps bind the I can't get used to the new acronym. So I just want to recognize Becky as well.
Okay. Yes, Director Osborne.
I have a question for our auditor. You probably are aware that we have passed a bond issue to pay off our PERS indebtedness. Now, that shifts it from one category to another, but how would that affect our rating or the whole audit system in the future?
So we have that as a subsequent event because it happened on May 17th, I think it was.
Yeah.
So you'll see that in note 9. And like Tony said, it's going to reduce your net pension liability because you're going to be able to have that fiduciary net position increase. And then you're going to remove your net pension liability and then increase the debt. It'll be an addition to long-term debt for 2022.
So it's just a shift in columns, basically.
It's a shift in columns, and it's also kind of a, I'm sure you guys went through projections based on what CalPERS can do and what you guys can do in terms of the liability and locking in a rate lower. I know we were running to get that rate in as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Perhaps any questions from the public?
Well, before we call questions from the public, we need to finish the PowerPoint, and we need a first and a second.
Yes.
Okay, I'll move option 1.
Okay.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded by.
Okay, for just give me 1 second here so we could have the option up on the screen for the members of the public. And let's just click through here and see if Tony has, oh, there we go. And he will call the option, just option 1, if you don't mind terribly.
Okay, option 1, receive and file the 2021 annual audit and 2021 report on applying agreed-upon procedures related to the appropriations limit
Okay.
And staff recommendation.
is option 1.
Right, and it's been motioned for option 1, but. And seconded. Now we'll receive comments from the public.
And just as a kind reminder, if members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. And if you're not quick on the agenda, if you're participating from your phone, you can do *9 to raise your hand from your telephone and *6 to unmute yourself. Or if you're participating on the computer, you can just click that raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen. It'll notify us and we will allow you to speak. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 10. Option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Okay, let's vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Lori, Director Anzini, or President Anzini. Tony, excellent job. I love the way you do all the ratios, shows our comparisons with other agencies. It shows that we're in a strong financial position, but it takes a lot of work. So I want to congratulate you and your staff for doing a great job there.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We'll move to item number 11. Engineering is here to report.
It's been a busy morning. Good morning. My name is Kaylee DeLongchamp. I'm a associate engineer here at the district, and I'm the project manager for the Camino Seeker project. And I am here to talk about a contract amendment for engineering services related to the project. Next slide. So back in 2019, the board approved a utility agreement with Caltrans for the relocation work. Next slide. And then in April of 2020, the board authorized funding for the project associated with the construction costs. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Also on that slide before was the November, sorry, I was going too fast, was the November capital improvement plan, which included the project. There we go, next slide. And then in April of 2022, which was earlier this year, a change order for inspection services was approved by the board. Next slide. So just a quick rundown to remind everyone what the project is. So the project is to install an undercrossing up in Camino to no longer have left turns across Highway 50. So right where they chose to put the undercrossing, we have two of our most important transmission lines. We have on the north side, El Dorado Main Number 1, which we'll refer to as EDM 1. And then on the south side, we have El Dorado Main Number 2, which we will refer to as EDM 2. So as part of this project, we had to install about 600 lineal feet of 30-inch concrete pressure pipe for EDM 1 and about 500 lineal feet of 36-inch concrete pressure pipe for EDM 2. So there have been several project challenges that have come up during construction. So on EDM 1, we had 2 line stop failures. A line stop is a temporary valve. And we had 2 failures of them before we finally got a ceiling so they could do the contract construction. And then there was also a problem with the initial construction not being compliant with project specifications, which resulted in a rejection of pipe. And then on EDM 2, we had 1 segment of pipe that was damaged with a backhoe. And then again, a portion of the pipe was not compliant. The installation was not compliant with standard specs, and so therefore was rejected. In addition, the installation was not installed on the correct line and grade, which meant that the tie-ins, once we were ready to tie in, were also off on line and grade. Next slide.
Were those line stop failures?
Right, thank you for asking that question. Me too.
Our valves, or were they valves that were installed by the contractor?
So a line stop is a temporary valve that the contractor installed.
Okay.
So it was basically their
It's their
problem.
fault.
So I will kind of look to Mr. Polson on some of this. This is one of the contentions that is currently before the dispute review board, which,
Okay, so that's, all right, I've
Yeah,
got it.
it's best that we not
Right.
litigate the claims in this proceeding at this point, but we are pursuing our options to ensure that the district is made whole from the issues that Kaylee's describing.
Thank you.
so I have a couple of pictures here from when we had replacement pipe put in for EDM 2. This was pipe that replaced rejected pipe. So this was them taking out pieces of pipe and then putting in the new pieces. Next slide. And then these are a couple of pictures from the tie-in. I chose these pictures because you can really see how they were off on line and grade. On the left one, you can see the string that was pulled from center of line right there, and it's not lining up with the center of the new pipe.
Can't you just kind of bend it a little bit?
Exactly, just like that, no? So we did some stuff in the field there to make it work. We had to shrink some of the pieces, and it all came together. It's online, it's good, we've had no leaks on it. That's the good news. Next slide. And then this is just some more pictures from the tie-in. So this was a practically 40-hour event. So we had contract inspection out there for the entirety of the 40 hours that the contractor was working nonstop. In addition, the contractor had personnel out there for 40 hours straight with rotating shifts. So it was a big thing getting it all done. But like I said, it's done. It's tied in. It's good.
It's not leaking.
It's not leaking.
Good.
So, like I said, we do have 4 claims that are before the dispute review board currently. So there's more claims going to them, but there's only 4 claims related to EID work. So like I said, one of them is the EDM 1 line stop failures. One of them is the stop work notice and then subsequent pipe rejection associated with the EDM 1, as well as the rejection associated with the 1 piece of pipe that was hit by a backhoe. And then we also have change order number 16, which included some realignment of EDM 1 and EDM 2, and that's currently also being disputed by the contractor. And then EDM 2, rejection of pieces 46 through 50 and piece 43 are also being disputed by the contractor. So we had the first dispute review board meeting, the line stop failures on May 12th. We expect results
May?
sometime in July.
May
12th.
You already had it.
We had it.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are the 4 claims,
Okay.
and we've had 2 meetings so far. So the first one, the line stops went on May 12th. We're hoping for results in July.
Okay.
And they did indicate that during this last meeting that they're going to get us results soon. The second meeting, sorry, Jen. The second meeting was in June. It was June 23rd for the EDM 1 stop work notice and rejection. That should be probably getting results 30 days after. So we'll see. And then the third meeting is tentatively scheduled for August at this point. Sorry. There we go. So as we ran into these issues, the district hired a engineer who had engineering expertise to help us assist us with sort of the pipe rejection, reinstallation, failures, and just sort of claim support, and that was Waterworks Engineers. So Mr. Todd Cody of Waterworks has been phenomenal in helping us sort of make sure that we are following standards and specs and industry standards as well. Next slide. So the original contract started out with a small amount to help us with the inspection of EDM 1, and from there, it just, as more issues came up, more time was needed. With this new contract amendment, it takes us above the 100,000 mark, and therefore, that's why I'm here, for board approval. So with all these issues we've run into in construction, the original funding did not anticipate the magnitude of engineering services and capitalized labor that we were going to expend on this. So for that, we need additional funding to help cover those costs for both engineering services, increased capitalized labor of both myself and engineering manager Elizabeth Dawson, and then also with the DRB process and claims resolution as we prepare for those and then go forth to those meetings. So it was funded for 1.2 million, and we have spent to date about 727,000. So this new funding request brings us to a balance of 950, which will cover both the pending reimbursement to Caltrans for EDM 1, as well as remaining claims and resolution. So board options. Option 1 is approve a contract amendment to Waterworks Engineers LLC in the not to exceed amount of $35,000 for additional engineering services, and authorize additional funding of $385,000 for capitalized labor for a total funding request of $393,000 associated with the community safety project. And we recommend option 1.
Okay.
I'll move option 1.
All right.
I'll second it.
And I also want
But
to,
I have a question.
I want to compliment you because I know this has been a bear. And it's nice that we're reaching the finish line on it.
We're so close.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And Director Osborne.
My understanding in talking to people involved with this thing, this project was supposed to be completed by now. And now they're saying December. And, you know, for us folks that traverse that piece of ground all the time, it's rather interesting. Anyway, but I assume that when we keep adding these costs to that when you go to this, is it DRB or the board, that is, I mean, it's an open question. Is that correct? I mean, as we keep adding these things, is it, I mean, it's not a fixed number.
Director Osborne, I believe you're asking whether the costs associated with our increased reliance upon Waterworks LLC
Right.
would be recovered. And I believe the answer to that is we're not seeking reimbursement for the cost to Waterworks LLC in the claims that we've submitted to the Caltrans Dispute Resolution Board. Is that correct, Kaylee?
That is correct. We're not currently asking for anything.
These are essentially sunk costs associated with our being able to present our claims effectively to the dispute resolution board and any proceedings that might follow that if the dispute resolution board does not ultimately result in a satisfactory resolution of those claims. So as Kaylee described, Waterworks LLC is providing the expertise to the district in inspecting the issues that we've had on that project and therefore helping us pursue those claims.
Well, I guess, to put it in my simple terms, because of their default in their construction process and damages and all that other stuff, can't we make a claim against their air and emissions insurance?
Again, I appreciate that, Director Osborne, and we certainly will take advantage of all opportunities to pursue our costs vis-a-vis this contractor, but it's an incremental process, and right now we're at the stage where we're trying to work through it with the contractor before we take whatever the next step may be, which may. I haven't investigated whether or not we have that right under our contract with Caltrans, but we will be pursuing our options as they become available. We are required at this point in time to participate in the dispute resolution board process with Caltrans. Whether that resolves the issues, we're not yet certain, but we will take advantage of opportunities as they arise.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Thank you very much for bringing this forward, and we probably will learn more about it later. So, all right.
Public comment?
Public comment, please.
President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 11, option 1, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Osborne. We are ready for the vote.
All right, board members vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, we'll move on to item number 12, another engineering project. You like to speed up these meetings by putting them at the end, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
We just save all the exciting stuff for you guys. Okay, good morning. John Money, Senior Civil Engineer. And I am here this morning for a contract and funding request for the headquarters backup power modifications project. This project was included in last year's CIP, and recently I gave a update to the board regarding all of our battery energy storage projects and a funding request to pre-purchase generator and ATS associated with this project, as well as some capitalized labor and other miscellaneous charges to move this project forward. The reason, again, we are pursuing this project is board policy. You know, basically, we're seeking anywhere we can to segment or augment our electricity portfolio in order to minimize PG&E cost and also generate additional revenue if possible. Additionally, this site is only a portion of the HQ building is available for backup power during emergency events, and that has presented a larger risk to the district given PSPS and other grid events that we've been experiencing. So again, I want to just kind of emphasize, so although this is a single CIP, it's really consists of two separate but interrelated projects. The first we kind of identified as phase 1, and that
is largely the work of Tesla under an SGIP grant. So ideally, under those SGIP funds, Tesla would come in, they would install a battery energy storage system at no cost to the district, and then we would move on. However, we already had a CIP planned for installing a generator and making the campus a little bit more functional. And so that kind of blends some of that scope in together. So if we would have just put a battery in front of the generator or in front of the building, given up a couple parking spots there, not had county planning commission requirements to bring that up to code with our facility, it would have been, just a project on, the batteries themselves would have just all been on Tesla. However, because there's a little bit of that blending, there's a cost share for construction in the amount of $75,000 to share conduits to get the facility onto the side of the building where it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, and also to meet planning commission requirements. There's also a requirement to update the PG&E service, and that allows not only the battery to be installed, but also allows us future options with solar and EV charging as we move forward, and then again, capitalized labor and contingency. So all that work kind of associated with phase one has began. As you can see, probably this morning, Tesla's on site installing that first phase of the battery installation as we speak. Again, just kind of a summary of the SGIP program. So Tesla, independently of the district, has applied for and will receive about $1.25 million SGIP funding to install the battery at this location. That should give us about a day's worth of emergency backup power, which again gives us a little bit of flexibility before we kick over to a generator. And in normal power outages, that's all we should need. Seldom do we see extended outages just because the power went out. The other thing that's important to realize, to recognize on this graph is the estimated savings. 10-year to 20-year, we're somewhere between 500,000 and a little over $1 million in power savings by implementing the battery storage portion of the project.
So our plan is that it's not just for emergency backup. Are we going to be using it like to shave our peak?
Correct. So all the battery storage, that's really, at the end of the day, that's kind of the primary bread and butter of the battery storage, is that we charge the batteries during off-peak hours and then supplement, if possible, that entire peak period, we provide just electricity from the battery back to the facility. So in this case, the building. In other locations, it'd be the treatment plant or pump station that the battery's servicing.
Excuse me, what's the life expectancy of these batteries?
That's the $1 million question right there. Tesla, so the 8 installations that we have are under a 10-year warranty and service plan with Tesla. So we're expecting a minimum of 10 years. Their projections are out for 20 years. In general, this is the same technology that they put into their cars. And so it's a little hard to stick a flag on that because it just hasn't been around that long. Likely what we'll do is we'll evaluate as we're approaching that 10-year period where Tesla's warranty and O&M is expiring. And then we can reevaluate if we want to liquidate the facilities at that time, or if they're still performing, we can continue that on up to that 20-year or estimated period as we move forward.
Okay.
Got to help them buy Twitter.
Right. So moving on to what we're here today about to discuss is what I've kind of delineated as the phase 2 work. And that includes a contract to build a block wall enclosure around not only the battery storage, but also the generator and ATS that we pre-purchased, install concrete pads within that enclosure. wire up the generator and do startup of that facility, and then do other miscellaneous wiring within that enclosure to tie it into the building and whatnot. Also, pull boxes again for that future expansion of EV or solar if the district chooses to pursue those in the future. That said, the bids received, we actually had to rebid this project once. I was hoping to follow up after our last presentation with the next board meeting. Unfortunately, we only had one bid, so we rejected all bids and came back with a second bid. With that second set of bids, our low bid is for just over $409,000 for that portion, or for the second phase of the work.
The big range, a big spread.
It is a big range. I think it's so speaking with a couple key points there, actually. Speaking with the contractor for the single bid we received on the first time, they were much closer to that higher end range. And they were a little antsy because they were saying that they were anticipating about 15% increase in electrical costs or in their costs per quarter. So again, I think it kind of speaks to the bid environment we're in and the material. I mean, we're kind of in a challenging case all the way around right now.
It's a wild west out there right now with the solar and the batteries.
Well,
Wild,
and I was just talking to a guy last night that's trying to build his house, and lumber prices go up, and then they come down a little bit, and then they go up, and so it's.
Do we have any experience with Royal Electric?
Actually, we do. So Royal Electric is the contractor with, is a subcontractor to Granite on the Folsom Lake Intake project, and to date they've done excellent work.
Okay.
So along with the contract, we are also asking for an additional project contingency, given that work of $41,000 for a total funding request of $450,409. It's important to note that the total amount for this project is significantly above, because we already authorized with that previous board authorization additional funding, more than what the CIP had in there initially. But we've had, again, as we just discussed, challenges with the bid market. We also expanded the scope to incorporate that new PG&E service and kind of future-proof this building for, the regulations that we anticipate will eventually hit us. And regardless, at the end of the day, we're pretty fortunate in that the long-term offset of the peak shaving, we still anticipate will cover the total cost of this project. So the total backup of this building was identified as a CIP project before we secured that SGIP funding. So really, by pursuing that, we get almost a free-ish project to the district, and definitely an improved facility. So. With that being said, staff is recommending option one, which is to award a contract to Royal Electric Company in the not-to-exceed amount of $409,409.01 for construction of the headquarters backup power modifications project, and authorize an additional funding of $41,000 in project contingency for a total funding request of $450,409 for the headquarters backup power modifications project. And staff recommends option one.
Okay.
I'll move option one.
I'll go second.
Okay, that took a little while, but that's okay. There's been a motion and a second to approve item number 12. So this is an opportunity for the public to speak and ask questions.
President Enzini, it does not appear any members of the public have a comment on action item number 12, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne. We are ready for the vote.
Okay.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, we'll move to item number 13, finance. Aha. I understand we're going to be getting some diesel rebates in the new budget. Put in for it now.
I'm Greg Royal. I'm the Fleet and Building Maintenance Supervisor. We are coming to the board to actually up our contract for our fuel pricing. Currently, the district utilizes a piggyback contract with El Dorado County. We use that to purchase all of our bulk fueling services from our Hunt & Sons dealer, and that's for all of our district vehicles and equipment. The amount for last year's contract was awarded on, it was actually on November 8th of 2021. That was a typo, for $800,000. The fueling needs consist for our vehicles, all of our heavy equipment, as well as all of our generators throughout our pool area. Next slide. Due to all the conditions lately, we've all been seeing it. The fuel prices have been going through the roof, and so we are just adapting and just kind of stay up. As you can see, of our wonderful picture there, that it just keeps going up and going up. So we actually had our wonderful staff pull together some prices from the last couple of years to see how much we are using, so that we can kind of, moderate how much power outages we have. Because how last year we didn't have very many, but we have to be prepared for if we have a lot.
So, question, do we just pay market rate when we use our card lock system, and what we're really doing is authorizing a gross number?
We get a pretty great discount through what we do, through our contract and through what El Dorado County and everybody does. So this, just like everything else, everything has been kind of doubling as we go along.
Yeah, let me rephrase maybe. The cost of fuel is variable depending on
market.
that contract that the county has with Hunt Brothers.
Yes.
And we pay that same price at the pump as the county does, but it's variable.
Right,
So
yeah.
we're not budgeting line item per gallon, we're budgeting a total amount. And because of market circumstances, we're now approaching or exceeding that total amount.
So yeah, we did pull in about how many gallons we used during the peak power outage
Right.
year that we've had, because last year we couldn't really go off of that because we didn't have as many. So we kind of pulled in how many we used with the percentage that we've gone up, and that's kind of how we calculated the
Right.
end result of what we're going to need for the rest of the year.
Okay, thank you.
So these are kind of what we went off of when we met up here. So you can kind of see the first quarter there. We used about $157,000 worth of fuel. June through December, you can see the kind of huge increase that we've seen pretty fast. And that also kind of starts to incorporate when we do have power outages with the generators running and how much diesel we were actually burning through with the generators. And so that was 2020. 2022, you can see we're almost doubled already. So realistically, we just kind of judge off of the price per gallon and hoping that it doesn't get up to the $10 mark. So kind of just basing off the 2020 year is kind of where we made our projection, because that just incorporated the big power outages that we did have that year. So next slide. This is what we put together for option one: approve a contract change order to Hunt & Sons in the not-to-exceed amount of $200,000 for the card lock and bulk fuel purchases to support district operations. And we recommend option 1.
I'll move option 1.
All right.
I'll second.
All right, been motion and second to approve the contract change on option 1 for our Hunt by Hunt and Sons. Any comments from the public?
President Zini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 13, option 1, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Dwyer. And I think before we call for the vote, Director Osborne may have a question.
Just a comment. The other day, coming back from Northern California, I stopped in Carson City, filled up my diesel truck, $1 a gallon less than it is posted in Placerville. $1 a gallon. And the bill was still $145.
Don't drive
Ridiculous.
diesel.
Moved in the
Yeah. Yeah, just one thing, though. I did mention it, and everybody's read it, that the new state budget is going to be inclusive when it comes to refunding, rebating agencies, public agencies who use diesel. So look for that. That might drop that. A year from now, we might see it's not as, didn't hurt as bad. So, just my comment, my 2 cents. Anyway,
We are ready for the
Yes.
vote on action item number 13.
yes. Vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Okay, review of assignments. Before we adjourn, I wanted to request some information. We might want to put it on an item for information later, but specifically, maybe I can just do it offline regarding gift to public funds, regarding if we do rate amendments for our rates, for our customers' rates, water rates. And
I'm sorry, President Anzini, just so that I understand,
It's-
could you restate what it is that you'd like me to look
okay,
at?
what would be a gift of public funds? Because I hear this argument when there is any time a tax rebate that's going back to people. In our case, it would be a rate rebate. If that would be considered, is it considered as a gift of public funds? I probably just need some legal interpretation on that.
Sure, you bet. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, consider this meeting adjourned.